Today, I'm excited to welcome Colin Nederkoorn, founder and CEO of Customer.io, to our podcast. Excited to have you today, Colin.
Yeah, excited to be here.
One of the things that I was really excited to hear more about as I was kind of reading about your background, both personally and professionally, is one of the things you did that's kind of random is you organized a Windows XP on Intel Mac contest, and I was just trying to think like, why did he do this? What was the point? I'd love to hear more about that. It's sort of like a random early career thing that you did.
Yeah, so if you were, for those of us who were around way back when, there was this period of time where Apple was transitioning to a new architecture, and they were switching to Intel processors. And when they released the first computers that were running these Intel processors, it wasn't yet possible to run Windows on what looked to me and seemed to me like commodity hardware, right? It was it should essentially be just a laptop like an IBM laptop that I was using at the time. And I wasn't working in tech. I was working in my first job out of school. I was working in sales for a shipping company, and I convinced my boss to buy me a Mac. And I was like dual booting, or I wanted to be able to dual boot the Mac, because I preferred working on a Mac. I'd started using it in college, and my boss had said yes, and so this Mac was there, and it couldn't run Windows. And I was like, uh-oh. Well, I convinced my boss I could do my work on this computer. How do I solve this problem? And as I looked into it, it just seemed like it was theoretically possible. And so what I did was at this time, Slashdot and Dig were the sites that tech nerds went to. And so I made a website. I bought WinXP on Mac.com or something like that. And I put up this website. I put up $100 of my own money and offered to collect the money into a prize pot for anyone else who wanted to also make this happen. And we'd give away the prize, right? I'd give away the prize pot to whoever could help us run Windows on the Intel Mac. And I think we raised $13,500 from all these interested folks. And someone solved it. It was a bit of a pain to make it work. And pretty soon, I'd say like 3 to 6 months after our solution was out there, Apple released Boot Camp, which was their native solution for doing it. But it was a fun time, and it showed me that I could spot an opportunity in the tech market, and gave me the confidence that if I went for it, I could make something happen.
Right.
That was the real pivot point where I decided to change my career and what I was working on from not tech into tech.
Super interesting. So actually, just if I can go back just a minute, you mentioned sales at a shipping company. Is this like one of those big shipping container companies that you were powering throughout the world, or like what was going on there?
Yeah, it was bulk liquid, like petrochemicals. So
Okay.
I was in Houston, and I mean, when people think of petroleum, they typically think of like gasoline and crude oil and stuff like that. And the sort of the part of the business that's like so important to the global economy, but the oil companies care a lot less about, is all of these petrochemical products. And so they need to go from the refineries in the U.S. Gulf and in other areas, but there's a lot of refineries in the U.S. Gulf, and they need to go to manufacturing centers like China. So we did a lot of trade of these like bulk chemical products going out to China that would then come back as carpets or styrofoam packaging or like plastic products. And yeah, my job was, and I was pretty early in the career, but the career track is you're the broker. You sit in between the petrochemical company and the ship owner to negotiate a good rate to transport this bulk petrochemical product. So
super
it was
interesting.
An interesting niche industry. Not really my jam, but I gave it a try. I learned a lot.
Well, I think it's sort of an interesting, pattern of finding like these cool niche products to work on. That building your own kind, or I should say, finding a way to launch Windows on Mac, and then presumably doing other things as your career progressed. So like you mentioned, it was a great starting point for what you would eventually move into. So can you talk a little bit more about that early career transition? So I noticed, for example, that you were an IT specialist. You mentioned you were in sales, your product management, you're CEO now. How have those kind of various roles contributed to who you are now as CEO? Is it huge contribution? Has it changed a lot over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think my career, so Customer.io's, other than being an intern, Customer.io is the largest company that I've worked for. So I think that working primarily in small companies, you wear a ton of different hats. And one of the things that I learned, even in that first job where I was ostensibly hired to do sales, we had BlackBerries at the time, and I convinced the company to move or to set up a server rack in the office, and we installed like Microsoft Exchange, and there was all this stuff that I wanted to learn about, and so I found a way to like give me the opportunity to learn it and help the company solve a business problem. And so that was the like IT specialist hat that I got to wear because I wanted to, and because I sort of said, hey, I can do this. Let's build a server rack. And I think that's been my experience. Like when I got my first product manager job, it was really just because I was in a co-working space and there was a team of Rails developers that needed someone to interface with the client because the client was a bit of a pain. And they're like, well, if we get this Colin guy in there, he's pretty good at talking to people. So he can just get the requirements from the client and talk to them, and then we can just focus on doing, writing code and delivering stuff for them.
Right.
So
I see. It seems like a pretty common theme, at least that I've seen amongst my engineering friends and peers from startups. That desire to talk to customers sometimes is just absolutely non-existent. They just don't want to do it ever. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. And so I think like I've done so many different things. I've done, I did support, I've written code, I've really anything that needs to be done in a small business, especially a small technology company. I've probably done that role at some point. I like, there's a blog post out there about our first logo for Customer.io, which I was like, I can do that. And I shouldn't have been doing that, but
amazing. Well, it's interesting because I feel like, and we'll get into some of your, the founding roots of Customer.io and some of the roles you've performed as CEO, but it kind of seems like there's two parts of what I'm understanding or hearing from you. It's like a desire and constancy for learning, and then also like a willingness to feel uncomfortable, discomfort, and pain. Talking to customers where maybe the engineering team might not want to, going through the hassle to figure out how to boot Windows on a Mac, all these kinds of things that are just annoying. So, I'd love to hear a little bit about, Customer.io, for example, where I think you started it in 2012. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So, and like, had you experienced a problem at some prior company that was like, man, I really got to go out and figure this out? Or, what was that founding origin Batman story like for you?
I mean, I think when you look at a lot of startup founding stories, there's the Hollywood version of the story, and I don't know how many of these Hollywood versions of the stories are the actual stories, but we never quite had that version of the story. I think my co-founder and I were working at a venture funded startup in New York, and we both really liked working together. We wanted to start our own thing, and we began a process of trying to figure out what was an opportunity that we could go after. And both he and I think he more than me, but he was really interested in analytics and big data and sort of collecting data about what people are doing on a website. And so he had a product before Customer.io, which would just show you a live data stream of people visiting your site and what they were doing. And it was really through the process of talking to prospective customers that we heard a bunch of times, hey, I don't need another analytics tool. I've got 5 of those. But instead of showing me user behavior, if you could help me change user behavior, that's really valuable to me. That's like transformational to my business. It makes me more money, makes me more successful. Like that's valuable. So we heard that a couple times and said, kind of scratched our heads and said, well, hold on a minute. If we've got all of this user data coming in, we know what people are doing. What if we then added a rules engine on top of that and said, if people do this and they do that, but then they don't do this, we can send them an email to nudge them to do that. And if we can do that, then maybe we can deliver more revenue for a company, and maybe we can change user behavior and help them be more successful. And so when we started pitching that idea to people, and there was a lot of interest. And so we just kind of kept pulling on that thread, but it wasn't. And then in retrospect, when we looked at our company that we were working in, and we could then sort of say, oh yeah, we have some of these problems. Like our content for the emails that we're sending, the welcome email and onboarding emails, they're all buried in the code of the application. And hey, that is kind of annoying to not enable and empower our marketer to change that copy and have that go through the product development process every time one word needs to be changed in the welcome email. And so we were able to sort of fit our solution in Customer.io to problems that we had in the business we were in. But it wasn't like, oh man, like we're sitting around all day on thinking about these problems in our business and had a eureka moment about how Customer.io could solve it, and then went and built that business. Didn't quite work out that way.
Okay. No, I think I especially love one of the things you mentioned was the pain and the difficulty when it comes to like having to change a word or a phrase or a hyperlink. There's so many parts of a website, an app, an email that come back to, I need to wait for my developer team, my engineering team, my product team to prioritize it. And it's like, your product has eliminated so many of those steps, which I think has been great. And I think there's a lot of other products out there that I'm thinking back to 2016. I remember I asked our engineering team, hey, could we get, and this is for a different company, a company called Parse, but we asked them to type new signups into Salesforce. And they're like, we don't want to do that. It's not cool. So we ended up just using Zapier to plug it in. And since I've used Customer.io to do the same thing into Salesforce in our account. But I think that's a pretty important part of your business. Had you also thought about, maybe the founding story was more typical, I think, actually probably of how most companies find their roots. They thought it was an awesome idea and they went after it. But how about, in terms of what you hope to accomplish along the way? Like, were you thinking, I'm working at a VC company, I want to build a massive mega deca unicorn? Were you like, I want to build something that I can work with my partner on and just be excited by every day? What's it look like for you?
I think that our initial goal was the initial goal was just to replace our salaries. Try to figure out how could we make, I don't know, around $250K to replace our salaries, and then probably a little bit more and live in New York City. And I think that was the goal, but our initial expectation was we'd probably fail and have to move and have to get real jobs again. But it would have been a hugely valuable learning experience that would then make us more valuable, more hireable. It would increase our salaries at the next company that we would work for, because we had gone and tried to start a company. But I think our expectation was pretty low. And then every time we reached the next milestone, we'd reset. Okay, we achieved this. We got to break even. We got to 1 million ARR. We got to 10 million ARR. And we'd sort of look up and say, hey, where can we go from here? And I think like every time I've looked at the business, there's more there. There's more we can do for customers. There's more scope to the product that we could add to create more value. And I think we're not every business is going to be like that, but we're fortunate that there's just always more to do.
Right, for sure. One of the things that I had read about was this perspective that you had around, you mentioned working for a VC company, or VC-backed company, I should say. You mentioned that Customer IO didn't really fit very well into that sort of bootstrapped or VC-funded path. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, is that an important distinction? I'd love to know more about it.
Yeah, I mean, so we were fortunate, I think, by starting the company in New York, and I don't know what things are like these days, but I imagine the ecosystem you're starting a company in probably still matters. But we're fortunate in that we had a ton of support. We had a lot of angel investors around, and so it wasn't too hard for us to get some initial money into the business. And after that first year, I started talking to a few VCs. And we even put together a deck to raise a Series A. And I think the thing that I ran into was, so if you think about what I said a couple of minutes ago, where we were really just like looking a few feet in front of our face. Yeah. We didn't have this $1 billion vision for the company and what it would become. And so I had a really hard time, and you need that in order to convince VCs to invest. And I had a hard time helping them believe in the future prospects of the business because I didn't know what they were at that point. And so it didn't make sense for us to go down the VC path. I think like part of it was what we really needed more than money was time. We needed time to explore, time to build the product, time to do like customer development and really understand our market and what problems we were going to solve. And so, yeah, it didn't end up working out. We got a bunch of no's from folks that I pitched to, which I think was really great for us. And it forced us to really figure out and double down on making the business successful on its own, rather than trying to sort of, and I think the way that I think about growing the business is that we set our sights on like the next thing, which isn't too far ahead of us. And so if you're doing like big fundraisers with VCs, those steps up are massive. They're really far away. The milestones are really aggressive, and you have very little room for error. And so the path that we took, the next step wasn't as far away. There was a lot more room for error. We can kind of meander our way there instead of having to go in a straight line really fast. And it enabled us to build the company more slowly and deliberately. And the fortunate thing is with the SaaS business, you're really building, you can sometimes build a ton of momentum over time, just adding more mass and adding more customers. And I think of it like a snowball rolling down a hill.
Yeah, but yeah, first you had to push it sort of to the top, right? And then eventually you got it.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. That's pretty cool. We're, like looking at some of the early parts. So it sounds like, I guess at least in the VC world, as those folks and the types of companies are there, non-traditional, but for most companies, how you guys approached it was talk to customers, build a product, get revenue, build the business, and sort of iterate. You've probably made a lot of decisions over the years. Are there ones where you look back and you're like, man, I wish I had never made that decision, or you think that one decision was critical and key? Like, are there any of those kinds of thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of decisions. One, I'm proud that we launched as early as we did. I look at what our product looked like when we launched, and I don't think I would do that today. And I also don't think the market would accept what we launched with as our V1. I think the bar for every SaaS product is just a lot higher than it was 10, 12 years ago. And so if you're a new SaaS founder, like that, you really need to be very good to get any attention today. And then I think like as far as decisions we made that I would do differently, there's nothing I would really change, but there's one that I'm very curious about. We made this decision in 2014 to build a fully distributed company. And the other path there is, what if we stayed in New York? Like I moved from New York to Portland, Oregon. We then started hiring people anywhere in the world. And so the path we didn't take was building a very co-located company all in a city like New York. I don't know that we would have survived, but I'm curious, like what would the company have looked like in that version of reality?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting one. Have you found that? I mean, actually, maybe just a step back. Had you worked in a remote environment before, or is this like first time, just kind of like maiden voyage?
Yeah, it was the first time I'd done a remote environment, and we tested it out on, like, I think for a month. Everyone was working. There were 3 or 4 people in the company, and so for a month, everyone was working from a different spot. And so we tested it out like that, and then went all in on it.
Okay, interesting. So, I'd love to know if you'd be open to sharing, like, what do you? I mean, maybe not so much the pros and cons, because I think like those ones are a little bit more obvious. But you guys have been remote since effectively 2012. You're a significant company in terms of employees and revenue, and a great product. What are some of the things that you do that might be a little different or a little weird or unique that help you stay aligned and motivated? We've ran in a remote company at Zeit, and sometimes personally I find it tough to work alone, to be motivated to go out into my office and just be there. Anyway, so I'd love to hear how do you keep your team motivated? How do you stay motivated? How do you get alignment? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think most of the folks that work in our company skew slightly introverted, maybe less so on the sales side, but a lot of folks in the company like working remote and find that to some degree, if they were around their colleagues all day, every day, it would probably be draining for them. And I think I would include myself in that bucket. And I like the fact that even as our company gets bigger, my experience of the company is largely the same. I don't feel the size. Obviously, there's new people to meet, which is exciting, and new cities we have employees in, and all that stuff. One of the things that I think we saw early on. So if you think about a co-located company where the company goes from like 1 floor in a building to 2 floors in a building, all of a sudden the water cooler conversations are happening at 2 different water coolers, right? Like there's this physical barrier that's preventing communication within this organic communication. And so in a distributed company, the formal lines of communication have to be clearer and more well-defined. And you hit these issues much sooner, like this example of like the company going from 1 floor to 2 floors. Those are the types of challenges that you have to like find the formal ways of communicating, establish those like more awkward or corporate-y rituals so that everyone in the company stays aligned. And so I don't know that we do anything too out of the ordinary. We have a whole company meeting every month. The departments in the company, so there's like 275, 280 people in the company now. And so we the whole company meeting's less frequent, and then there's more regular like department and team meetings, so that folks are spending time with the people that they connect with or that they work most closely with. But yeah,
I
go ahead.
I saw a LinkedIn post. I can't remember. I think you had reshared it. It was maybe you're head of comms, marketing, sales, whatever, at a big dining table, bunch of customers. And I think your retweet was sort of, or share, whatever was something like, it looks like somebody's missing. So how do you think about like meeting customers or seeing customers, talking to customers? Because like in a remote world, I guess it would be pretty easy to pull yourself away, even as you described. Maybe you're an introvert, or you are more introverted. How do you make sure that you stay engaged specifically with customers then?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in the early days. I had a lot of email exchanges with our earliest customers. I think in the middle period of the company, I definitely drifted away from folks. But a lot of times I'll interact with customers on social media, and we've started to do events which people seem to really enjoy, and everyone's excited to connect with other folks who have their role at another company. And so the events that we've been doing have been going great. And I attended one of them in Chicago, and we've got another one coming up soon that I'm looking forward to attending as well. And so I'm trying to be where our customers are and do it in a more efficient way. But yeah, I find that like hearing folks talk about how they're using our product is like really energizing for me. It's not draining. Every once in a while, there's the uncomfortable, unhappy conversation that with someone, but I mean, those are far and few between.
Yeah, and I think too, I'm sure you've noticed this, even the painful ones lead to those eureka moments of like, whoa, what were we thinking? Or I can't believe that's broken, Cool. Well, I love that. I love that you've continued to stay engaged with your customers. Totally a different direction, but I saw that you guys recently rebrand. I think rebrands are pretty significant. They take a lot of work. I'm curious, like I don't remember having seen a prior rebrand. So love to hear what was the sort of thought process behind it? What were you hoping to accomplish? Was this more for you, more for the team, the customers? How do you view it?
Yeah, I think so. The way that I've thought about I think about like the marketing capabilities or the marketing side, and then the capabilities of the product. And you really want those to be closely in balance, or you want the marketing promise to be just slightly ahead of where the product is today. If those are too out of whack, then you're under optimizing the company, right? If your marketing is so far ahead that you're promising all of these things and you're painting a vision of the future that the product is so far from delivering on, then all these customers get disappointed. On the flip side, if the product capabilities are like so far ahead of how you present yourself to the market, then you're not getting credit for all of the good work that you're doing. And I felt that a couple of years ago, the product was, or it was maybe a year and a half ago, we had gotten to this point where the product capabilities were ahead of the way that we were talking about ourselves to the market. And we weren't getting credit for all of the good work we were doing. And so in a head-to-head against some competitor, people were picking the competitor who may be less capable than us because of what they perceived based on the brand and the website and how we portrayed ourselves to the market. And so when I hired our CMO, Jason, one of my big asks to him was to help me tell better tell our story to our customers and prospects. And we wanted to not look like all of the competitive set. We wanted to look a little different and hopefully refreshing, and make it easier for folks to pick us among competitors. And I think so. If you asked who was it for, I think it was for me. It was for our team. It was for our existing customers and our future customers. And I think like I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. And I think it just better portrays us as we want to be seen to the market.
Cool. I think that's such a great way to describe it, as being ahead of the product positioning, presenting, selling, all those kinds of things. That's super cool. And obviously as well, there's sort of that aspirational side of just being a brand that feels good, exciting, hopeful, all those kinds of things. Well, depending on what you want out of it, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe two other questions, but you've been leading a CEO for basically over plus or minus a decade. We're 2024, started in 2012. You've probably changed as a leader, as a CEO over that period. Is there anything that like you've really thought and reflected about, like, man, I can't believe that I used to be this way, or I really feel like I can do this now? Like, what are some of the big changes that you see from a leadership lens, or when you pull out your set of leadership CEO skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I think about leadership and my responsibility to the team is there's the opportunity that our company has, and my job is to turn myself into the person that the company needs for this stage and to capture the opportunity. And so the tools that I use as a CEO change over time, and the skills that I'm focused on developing are changing over time, as we progress through these different stages as a company. I think like the things that I would do early on, like having actually, so there's some tools which I still use, which I still find are helpful today. I think like connecting with people in the team on an individual level is really important. And we have this, we now have there's the folks who report directly to me, and then there's the next level of management who reports to them. I think forming a relationship, like removing the barriers as much as possible. So it's not like Colin said something and then someone then needs to translate what I said into a mandate for someone else to translate what I said into something for an individual contributor to understand. I think as we've grown, what I still try to do is give people enough of a sense of my voice and what's in my head, so that ideally people in the company can understand how I'm thinking about things and my approach to running the business. And I think that's one of the ways that I try to keep us aligned. But like the tools will change. The goal is always the same. We want an aligned company where everyone is rowing in the same direction and people know what we're working towards. But the way we accomplish that, it keeps evolving.
That's super interesting. I think that's great, especially how you framed it as like sort of be who you need to be at the time. But it also sounds like that consistent message of, hey, we're going this direction. I need everybody come in this direction, and then kind of you're engaging everyone along the way. One just last quick question is, going back to your sort of formative roots, starting the company. Is there any advice, whether it's conventional, traditional, or unconventional advice, you'd give to folks who are looking to start something like you did, or follow a similar path from sales to CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the advice that I would give really like anyone starting a company is pick your market well. I think I thought about this a little bit when we started, but we were so fortunate to have picked the email marketing and marketing automation market, because it's a massive market. The TAM that we have is huge. We also managed to pick a part of the market that was growing, not shrinking. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that you cannot change later. And once you go down the path, it's really hard to pivot to a new or different market. And so that initial decision, more than your technology stack or who your co-founders are, if you pick a good market, like you can solve a lot of the other problems. If you pick a small market or a tough market to break into, all of those things are near impossible to overcome.
Beautifully said. Well, Colin, it's been great talking with you, and thanks for sharing some insights and thoughts today with us.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
See ya.